Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Ray Andrews. I'm the Executive Director of the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. We're the affiliate chamber of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar session that we're having here this Wednesday, July 19th. In the next hour, we'll learn a lot about cybersecurity. And with us today is an expert, Marlon Bermudez, who'll be talking a little bit more in detail about that. And we'll be hearing from our sponsor for this today, the counsel, David Gemma from Unipen, and Ed Tankus from Alliant Technologies, who's going to tell us a little bit about the council itself and his work here with the chamber. So stand by. We'll be able to begin in just a moment. Thanks for being with us. Welcome, everybody. I'm Ray Andrewson with the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to our Wednesday edition here today of our webinar. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity, social engineering, and today we have an expert who's going to be joining us, Marlon Bermudez. He is a cybersecurity consultant with Marber Security. He'll be our guest in just a moment. We'll be starting our webinar in about 2 minutes, so thank you for joining us. Hi, everybody. I'm Ray Andrewson. I'm the Executive Director of the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. We're the affiliate chamber of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We're about to begin our webinar, and that is going to be coming up in just a moment. And we'll be talking with an expert, Marlon Bermudez. He'll be here from Marber Security. We'll be talking about cybersecurity, social engineering. We'll be starting our webinar in 30 seconds. Thank you. So welcome, everybody. I'm Ray Andrewson with the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce, the affiliate chamber of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to our session today. We're talking social engineering and cybersecurity. And it's brought to you by the Technology Council of the Greater New Haven Chamber and all of our affiliates, and presented by Unipen. And we'll be hearing a little bit about that in just a moment. It's really great to be with you here today as we learn a little bit more about how to protect your infrastructure, your technology needs, and Marlon Bermudez will be telling us a little bit about that in just a moment. Before we introduce our guest presenter here today, I'd like to also bring in at this point, as part of our Technology Council, presented by Unipen, I'd like to bring in David Gemma, who is the CEO and CMO of Unipen, to have a few remarks. And David, if you'd like to join us, we'd like to hear a few words from you.
Great. Thank you, Ray. And thank you all for joining our webinar on social engineering threats, hosted by the Technology Council of the Greater New Haven Chamber. I'm David Gemma, CEO and CMO of Unipen, and we're a proud sponsor of the Technology Council, which is a consortium of vendors whose products and services help Connecticut businesses grow. So Unipen's a high-tech firm, and over the past 30 years, we've been helping protect Connecticut businesses. Our IT experts and technologies provide your business with a multi-layered set of defenses made up of IT services, disaster recovery, and cybersecurity. And looking back, as technology has continued to evolve, computers have actually become better protected and less vulnerable to hackers. So what do the hackers do? They take the easy approach and adapt, and they go after the most vulnerable part of most businesses, your employees. So one of the most effective methods used by hackers is social engineering, which we'll cover today, which involves tricking individuals to giving up confidential information that they can use for financial gain. So Historically, Unipen has worked together with our clients to combat social engineering threats, and we believe that education and awareness are crucial in this fight. So by working together, we can try to stay one step ahead of the cyber criminals and protect your business from these evolving threats. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar and that our cybersecurity expert, Marlon Bermudez, helps you come away with a better understanding of social engineering threats and how to protect against them. Thank you all.
Great. David, thank you so much. Thank you for being part of our chamber and support of the Technology Council. Our Technology Council is led by another member of the chamber, one of our ambassadors, the owner and president of Lion Technologies, Ed Tankus. Ed, tell us about what we're going to see and hear today from Marlon.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ray, and thank you everybody for joining in on this webinar. Just to step back for a second, we're doing webinars on a variety of technology topics and issues that businesses are encountering. Usually we do that every other month. Our next one will be tentatively in September, followed by the Big Connect presentation in November. The Tech Council is primarily built to provide information, education, and other things that are useful to the New Haven Chamber partners and partner businesses and businesses in general. We want to make sure that what we do is not so heady and so geeky that folks out in the community just wind up walking away from one of these presentations scratching their head. I think you'll find from Marlon and from other presenters that there's a wealth of information here that will not go over your head, and that will be very useful. As far as Lion Technologies, we provide outsourced IT for a variety of firms, including the Haven and Quinnipiac chambers, auto dealerships, and many more. And we have experience in many of the fields, including cybersecurity and other things that both Marlon will touch on and that David has mentioned in the past. So we welcome you to these presentations. Grab your lunch if you have, sit back, and I think you're in for a great and interesting lunchtime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ed. Thank you so much for what you do as well. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker at this time, Marlon Bermudez, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant at Marbor Security. We'll be talking a little bit as we go on through the hour. He'll be giving our presentation, and about 12:30, we're going to start welcoming in your comments. If you'd like to put them in the Q&A or the chat, we'll be sharing them with Marlon on the back end. We may have a couple of questions ourselves here at the chamber that we'd like to learn a little bit more about what's going on. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to Marlon Bermudez of Marbor Security to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity, keeping our IT and infrastructure safe. Marlon, welcome.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Marlon Bermudez. I have over 16 years of experience in cybersecurity. I work for a large IT company for about 10 years. I published a book in cybersecurity. It's actually called Cybersecurity for Small and Mid-sized Businesses. It's on Amazon. I got a master's in cybersecurity and a lot of cybersecurity. And Marbor Security was founded to help small businesses and mid-sized businesses with their cybersecurity needs. And today we're going to learn about social engineering attacks and how to empower employees, how to recognize those. Before that, I want to cover a little section about ethical hacking. So there are a couple of types of hackers out there. There is white hats, which are the good guys trying to protect the companies. There are the black hat hackers trying to take advantage of the organizations and get financial gain from attacks. And there are the gray hat hackers that are in between. So these are the 5 phases of ethical hacking. And the first one is reconnaissance, where they will go out there and they will do a lot of homework to try to identify how they could get access to an organization, how they could successfully social engineer employees. And they could use a lot of information, anything from LinkedIn, trying to find out what type of email system an organization might have, or just try to figure out, the physical layout of a building. Because hackers have such a structured approach, cybersecurity professionals need to have another structured approach, and this is called defense in depth. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to protect the critical assets, and that could be client data, that could be company data, it could be a lot of different things. So there are a lot of different layers that a hacker could try to bypass in order to get access to that data. Secure awareness and training is one of the things that organizations could do to try to empower employees on how to protect that. There is a concept of the human firewall, which basically there is a cybersecurity chain, and they usually mention that in the cybersecurity chain, humans or the employees are usually the weaker secure link. And why is that? Well, people might say, well, there are all those layers that hackers will have to go through, but I have a strong password. So a strong password could be a lot of different things. But for example, if you have a nice complex password, and that password is, let's say, 12 characters, it would take a lot of years for an attacker to try to crack that password. So with all those things in place, if the password is complex and it's very difficult for an attacker to try to get access to that, it might just be easier for the attacker, instead of trying to break all that protection, all those different layers, to just simply ask the user for the password. And they would do that in a lot of different ways. So that brings us to social engineering. It's basically an attempt to trick somebody into sharing private information. And that could be those strong passwords that you have, protecting your secrets or protecting your company data. It could be access in the way of remote access to your computer to help you with your issues that you're allegedly having, or it could be secrets. How do they do that? Well, they target human nature. So they would target trust, basically, they would build trust. They would target curiosity, they could target fear, they could target emotions in general. So a couple examples of these would be, if you're in, let's say a company has 50 employees, and all of a sudden somebody finds a flash drive in the parking lot that says 2023 or 2024 salaries. Odds are that somebody who finds that might plug it into their computer out of curiosity. If they plug it into their business computer, there are systems out there that you could craft a malicious flash drive called a rubber ducky flash drive. And as soon as they plug it in, then the attacker could get a lot of information and even possibly access to that computer. So that would be part of targeting curiosity by the end user. Some of the types of social engineering include scareware. So these could include your computer all of a sudden telling you that you have a virus infection, or that there is something wrong with the computer and you have to call Microsoft, or you have to dial this phone number. Sometimes they tell you that they're from the FBI, or you might even hear sound coming off your computer. Other types of attack include email. So there is a difference between email hacking and email phishing. Phishing is when you get an email trying to say your password has expired, or somebody's trying to get access to your account, or hey, your UPS package has been delayed, click here to reclaim your package, or it's going to be delivered. And those are usually more successful around the holidays. Email hacking could be a combination of finding a compromised password and that email not having two-factor authentication. Access to tailgating, some companies actually have a policy where all the employees have to check in with a badge, and basically you have to use an access control system. An attacker could simply just put in a UPS uniform or something like that looks like it and hold the box. And most people would try to be helpful and let that person right through. Other ones would be watering hole attacks. Those are more on a compromised website, a website that you trust, basically leading to other things. So for example, you could have a malicious ad on a website doing malvertising. Then at that point, you might have a malicious ad infecting your computer or so on. Physical breaches, somebody could dress as your internet provider and just get access to your server room. So that's another thing to be careful with. Pretexting, that could take the form of multiple ways. It could be after a lot of research, it could be them sending you an email, so it could be phishing, but it could be them picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'm from the IT department. And at that point, they might have a lot of research, or if they know that your CEO is out on vacation or out of the office, they could send you a text or an email, essentially saying something about buying business gift cards, or changing wire transfer instructions, a lot of different things. And baiting is more about, hey, you want something, or click here, just give us a few information and we'll give you a $500 gift card. Similar to quid pro quo, where you're exchanging some information for some type of reward at the end of the day. So let's take a look at Scareware. So currently, there are a lot of computers getting these out there. And it might be that your Mac computer is infected, and they are usually pretty good at detecting whether you have a Windows computer or a Mac computer. And usually it would have a pop-up, may even have noise, but they want you to call a phone number. Once you call that phone number, they'll have remote access to your computer. They'll determine that you have all these issues. They'll ask for your credit card information. And then after that, your credit card will be compromised. And this is just another example where essentially they're trying to get you to either buy the software or get you to have remote access to the computer. One way that this could be addressed easily is by blocking ads. So this is an example from screenshot from Yahoo.com from today. So here in red, you could see that there is this ad. There are two ads in here. So most people would say, well, I don't care about ads. That's okay. So there are two benefits. First, that you could see that the right side looks a lot cleaner, and then you don't have to deal with the ads. So for the scenario where people don't necessarily care to install that ad blocker, let's take a look at this. Let's say somebody's just looking for Microsoft support. So they're looking at a Microsoft phone number, they're going to Google. Right off the bat, we get these three sponsored, which are basically paid ads, links that will send you to places that are definitely not Microsoft. Now, the Microsoft phone number is the one at the bottom. If you have an ad blocker, it would show up on the right side, basically just plain no ads or anything. If you don't have an ad blocker, whether you end up trying to Google Microsoft phone number or QuickBooks on Netflix, what have you, depending on the product that you're trying to obtain support from, usually anything that says sponsor, it could be Microsoft, but odds are that it would be a third-party company. Now, there might be a legitimate third-party company, or they might be malicious ads. Malicious ads usually don't last that long in Google because they're reported. But if you happen to click on those and give them access to your computer, then that would be an issue. And an easy example of those is sometimes Microsoft will actually call you saying, hey, your computer is running slow, or your antivirus is about to expire. And they might have information about you buying a computer from a specific store, and then that warranty about to expire, and then potential issues. So whether it's a combination of malicious ads in this case or getting a phone call, it's a matter of being careful with that. And going back to the ads, there are a lot of ad blocker tools out there. This is one that could be used. It's a free one. It's called uBlock Origin. And essentially, as you're using that tool, which is free, you can install it for Chrome, Edge, and Firefox, and a few other browsers. If you have issues with a website that there are legitimate ads that you need to have in that page for whatever reason, you could just click on the extension and click on that blue button, and then the ads are allowed for that specific website. You're still protected on all the other sites, but by clicking on that blue button, it allows you to use that page normally. So going back to business email compromise, Verizon, they have a business incident report that happens basically every year. They do that. So one of the things that this image shows from the report is that business email compromise, and that could happen in many ways, essentially has continued to increase over the years. How do criminals carry that out? And this is an image from the FBI. So normally they would identify a target. They do a little bit of research, trying to find out what type of email system they have, try to find out if they have compromised emails, passwords, try to just gather as much information as they can. And if there are compromised passwords, they can actually automatically try to test to see if they can get into these compromised accounts. If the password is not compromised, they could simply send a legitimately looking phishing email to get access to that. Then they establish trust, which would be a step number 2. Or they could just simply stay in the back and just wait and read the emails. So if the CFO of a company is going to go on vacation, they will wait for a specific time before they can reach out to the vendor that the CFO is working with, and then offer to change the wire transfer instructions. And then at that point, there would be the wire transfer fraud. So they could literally walk away with money at that point. And unfortunately, I've seen organizations being victim of that. As big as $3 million, unfortunately, they have been subject to that. In some cases, you're able to report that to the FBI, the local field office, or the Secret Service. They have a financial fraud department. So if you realize that you were a victim of financial fraud, then you're able to report that, and hopefully, if caught within time, you might be able to get some of that back. The other aspect of this is that if a business email is compromised, they could use it for wire transfer fraud, or they could leverage that to deploy ransomware to you. And ransomware could be deployed in a handful of ways. If the email has the same password as your local institutional password, because there isn't single sign-on authentication, then they could now potentially get access to your computer as well. So there is a link to ransomware. This is a good graph from the Verizon Data Breach report. And essentially what to look for here is that social engineering and system intrusion, over time, they fluctuate. But system intrusion, which could be part of ransomware, has consistently grown over the years. Artificial intelligence. So we might have heard about ChatGPT. There are a lot, if not thousands, of different AI platforms leveraging AI, BAR, and Claude, and a lot of the other platforms out there. But attackers are actually using this. So there is an evil twin of ChatGPT. It's called WormGPT, where attackers are actually using this platform. It's a dark web type of scenario where they're using this platform to create very legitimate business phishing emails that could target employees. So that's one of the things to be careful with. So we'll cover that in a little bit more, but that basically there is a dark twin of ChatGPT. There is also the usage of AI for voice cloning. For example, I personally use 11 Labs, and they're pretty good in terms of being able to clone your own voice or just create voice that sounds very realistic, so that you could call somebody and try to use phishing attacks or other types of social engineering. So the question is, how does all of these affect businesses and employees or individuals in general? Well, voice cloning could actually lead to family members being scammed out of money. There have been a lot of articles about family members allegedly calling their relatives and saying that they have been kidnapped or they're in danger and that they need to be rescued, basically ransom. And those are usually scams generated by AI bots. And those attack the social engineering aspect of human fear. This is another example. This one is just from July, basically a news article about how AI could be used, especially the voice cloning, which is pretty scary. So two more examples of business email compromise. In this case was more one due to phishing and another one due to a wire fraud scan. And both of them were due to phishing emails and people being tricked into that. So learning how to be careful and how to recognize phishing emails is very, very important. This is a local case as well that there are some details, not sure if they have been confirmed or not, but there are some details on some articles that the issue that they had was due to a phishing email. So phishing email, basically, they're sometimes targeted, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they just send phishing emails to everybody, and regardless of the industry or company size, they could fall victim for that. This is a website. It has a nickname. It has the nickname of the HIPAA Wall of Fame. And this is basically if you have patient records and you have more than 500 affected individuals, via the HIPAA security rule, you're required to report that. And the reason this is important here is because there are hacking and IT incident for email. So, and there are a couple of them here. So there are not details necessarily about this, but if they were caused due to business email compromise, which cannot be confirmed or denied here, but that could be a possibility, especially if it says hacking or IT incident, is just something else to be aware of. So how do hackers do all of this? Well, there are a lot of resources that they have. Anybody can go to this website, the open source intelligent framework, and you could look for anything you want, and basically they give you the resources. So for example, you're looking for email addresses and you're looking for compromised passwords, then you could use a lot of this. So let's take a look at the one above that says, have I been pwned? If you go to that website, and we'll provide the links once we post these on YouTube, we'll provide a list of links and resources, so this will be included there. But for example, if you type in your personal email address here or your business email on this website, it will tell you whether it has been part of a data breach. So for example, I use a legitimate email address and then removed it from here. But it told me that this email specifically was subject to passwords. It doesn't tell me what the passwords are. This service doesn't do that. But it tells you that, for example, Adobe had a data breach back in 2013, and whatever password that account had at the time has been compromised. And this is important to know because if a user or employee is using the same password for all the different accounts, then that could be an issue, especially if that password has not been changed. There are a lot of tools out there that security companies use to help their clients perform a dark web monitoring scan and for web monitoring as well. This is a screenshot of one of those tools. For example, I removed the email address and I removed most of the passwords. Some passwords are encrypted, which means that the attackers might not easily be able to find out what the password is. But there are a lot of passwords that are in clear text. And this specific tool provides only part of that password. There are other tools that will provide you with the full password. And those, then you could essentially provide that to your client. However, hackers can misuse that and they could send an email like this, where now they could say your password has expired, and they could actually copy and paste one of those expired passwords and send it to your email account. And if the password is in clear text in your email account, it will provide a little bit more of urgency, a little bit more of panic for the end user. For a couple of years back, there were a lot of different attacks that were being used to trick the user, basically using their password into believing that the attacker had already hacked their computer, had remote access to their computer screen, their camera, all of that. And they were trying to extort the user for money, actually for Bitcoins. So there are a lot of attacks out there that will actually try to use the end user password in an actual email to build credibility in the attack itself. So how do you protect from all of this? Well, there are a lot of different things that you could do. Checking the email address where it came from. Sometimes those are misspelled. For example, the ones that are a little bit more difficult is if you have an M, for example, and then they replace that with an R and an N. Those are called domain typo squatting, where they change the domain slightly. So that's a little bit more difficult to detect. Sometimes they reply to email address for an email that you received is different. So that's also a red flag. Poor grammar and spelling, that historically has been an issue, especially when the Nigerian prince is giving you money. However, with AI, all of that's going to be taken care of, and they're going to be even more realistic. So unexpected requests and urgency, anything that causes you to feel urgent that you have to reply right away, or an unexpected request from your boss or your CFO or anything like that. The best way to address that is to pick up the phone and call back that person. It could even be from a vendor. And even if the vendor has a phone number at the bottom, you're better off calling the vendor directly to the phone number that you have on file, the phone number that you trust. Hyperlinks and attachments are a little bit trickier. If you don't have a spam filter that's filtering all of that for you, if you have a business email, that might be a little bit trickier. If you have a free email account, then you also want to just hover over the link and see what it looks like at the bottom, because it might be talking about your Office 365 or your Netflix account, but the link might be sending you to a different place. Anything that requires you to change the password or PIN, that's something to be careful with. Sometimes you might even see an email that says that somebody's trying to hack into your account and you need to change the password to secure it right away. And they'll do a combination of you entering the password, then you getting a text message, and then with a 2FA code, and then you entering that 2FA code in that web page as well. So all things to watch out. Normally, if you suspect that your account has been compromised, you're better off going to the website directly. Let's say it's Office 365, you're better off going to office.com or google.com and try to enter your account there directly instead of clicking a link. There are best practices that are recommended. For example, education and awareness, that is a big one. And there are a lot of resources that are available out there. I'll share some of those in a little bit. The FTC used to have something called think before you click, and that's more of ensuring that people try to slow down a little bit before they click on something. Verifying requests by picking up the phone and calling your boss or your vendor to make sure that whatever request you're receiving in writing is actually accurate. And that could be more of a procedural thing as well. Protecting personal information. That is very crucial because a couple of years back, there was a data breach from Equifax. And right now, one of the items could be basically freezing your credit scores from all the three credit bureaus. And the instructions are different for all of them, but just freezing your credit score could actually help you from people being able to open credit cards on your behalf or just buy things like that. A big one is using two-factor authentication. That's extremely important because if somebody finds out your password, the only way to secure your account would be to do that, to have two-factor authentication. Using security software, that could mean a lot of different things. It could be anything from antivirus to encryption software to spam filtering. So there are a lot of different ways that your computer or your business could be secure. And using a strong and unique passwords, that really mentions more about using a password manager ideally. And there are a lot of different ones out there. There are some that you could use that are corporate level that are hosted in the cloud that you need to have a lot of security mechanisms to make sure it's secure. And there are some that are free that you could have locally on your computer as well. Some free resources. The FTC provides a lot of great resources. For example, they have the Cybersecurity Basics, which has some videos in there. They also talk about phishing and ransomware. They provide some really nice PDFs and instructions for both the business owner and just regular users in general. In addition to that, they have some resources. For example, they have a cybersecurity quiz. They have some videos in there, and they have some guidance just for employees and employers in general. And the idea is to try to obtain as much information as you can. There are a lot of platforms out there that would empower you with phishing emails, with videos and awareness training. Unfortunately, some of those platforms will try to essentially punish the user by clicking on a phishing email and then they have them watch a video. There are some platforms that will actually explain to the user how that email could have been better analyzed and things that they should have been looking for to better detect that type of phishing email next time. In general, I could speak about phishing and cybersecurity all day long, but I would like to open the floor for questions to see if anybody has any questions that I might be able to answer.
And this is your opportunity to put questions for Marlon in our Q&A in our chat as well. And Marlon, I'll just ask something to start us off right here, just practical day in, day out use. I think most of us who are dealing with dozens and dozens of passwords are trying to figure out how to manage them. And you can't really obviously recall, too many of them. What's been a tip that you can give us all that would be the most efficient way and the best way and the safest way to create passwords that provide us the best security?
So there are two ways. Ideally, the best way would be to use a password manager. And not all password managers are the same. But if you use a password manager that has a two-factor authentication, that would be helpful. But let's say that you're not using that. The better way would be to use a passphrase that is easy to remember, but it doesn't relate to your pet, your house, your favorite color, or any of those things. That would be the recommended way, to use just a longer passphrase to do that. The challenge is, even if you're using a passphrase, you might only have 5 or 10 passphrases that you remember, so people end up recycling those across different accounts.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, and using passwords that relate to something that's personal. So obviously, children's names, birth dates, obviously not social security numbers, but anything else that would be very easy to be traceable because they're related to other accounts that you might have. So maybe have a place in mind, Dubuque, Iowa, 1922 or something along those lines. something that has no direct relation to who you are.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different ways of doing that. For example, I have a Rubik's Cube on my desk. So the passphrase could be, I have a Rubik's Cube on my desk, or it could be, I have one Rubik's Cube on my desk, an exclamation mark at the end, throw some numbers and symbols, and that password itself would be very, very helpful. Would be a lot stronger than welcome 2023, which unfortunately a lot of people use, and then they're not, the passwords are not changed later.
Great. So we do have some questions that are coming in, Marlon. One of them from Cheryl. Where can I find a password manager site? Or are they?
Well, there are a lot of them. If you simply Google best password managers of 2023, that could give you some results, but a few that I might recommend would be 1Password, LastPass, and Keeper Security. The idea would be to make sure that whatever password manager you end up using, that it needs to have two-factor authentication. If you have a business, there is usually an enterprise version of that password manager to make sure that your employees actually have 2FA enforced.
Interesting. So let's open up more questions. You can throw them in the Q&A right here. We'd like to get this question from Alex, who's talking about organizations, Marlon, large organizations, what you can do to protect yourself from the increased prevalence of AI. Yes, about AI is on everybody's mind right now, ChatGPT, for example, and these social engineering attacks. So how do you do this from a large group? I think is what Alex is talking about.
So there are two ways. For the first layer of defense would be to empower the employees with secure awareness training. And there are a lot of platforms out there that provide training on that. Some of these platforms actually provide on what to look for AI phishing attacks. But because the attackers are using AI, then you have to fight AI with AI, right? So what you end up going to need at the corporate level is then have a spam filter solution that will actually use AI in the background to recognize this type of attacks. Because you could train your employees today, 2 weeks from now, AI is going to evolve a lot more, and the attacks that they're going to use are going to be different. So what you want to do at that point is making sure that you have a spam filter that's addressing all of those things and looking for those things as well.
Excellent. Great. So we'll carry on now with some of the questions that we've been receiving from you. So Jen asks, if you click on a link and then realize the email is a scam, does that give the hacker access to information? Or is the transfer of that information only once you start filling in the requested information? So you click on the link. When does the information start to get populated, I think is what Jen is asking.
So there are two things about that. If you click on a link and if it sends you to a website, so that's not as bad. If you start typing in information, there is a very high chance that the information is automatically sent to a database even before you click the save button or submit. So any information you might enter there might be compromised. So that's something to look for. If you end up downloading an executable from a file, let's say they send you a link to a Dropbox link and you have to put in a password to get access to this, and then you have to open an executable, and then you realize that executable then opens a website. Just having downloaded that executable could give them full access to your computer, and then you might not realize that. Now, you might have antivirus, you might have an EDR solution. There are a lot of different layers. They might be using a technique that bypasses all of that.
Excellent. Well, Ed just pointed out too, in terms of passwords, and we're just talking about that just a moment ago, using like an ampersand, using the pound sign or key or a star, and just mixing it up with lowercase and uppercase characters, you can still get the gist of your password, but kind of keep it a mix is what I guess you're saying, right? Yeah.
Well, the challenge is if you have a passphrase that you use or a password, right, that you normally use, and it could be one word or two words together, and then you try some numbers and symbols. Hackers have a lot of software out there that will automatically try to detect patterns. So, and this is done very, very quickly. So at the end of the day, the recommendation of a password manager is just to have a randomly generated password for each and every website that you have. So that way you only remember one password, which is a long passphrase to access this vault that would be protected with two-factor authentication. And then you have randomly generated password for everything out there. Yep. In fact, one of the things you could even do is when they ask you security questions, what year were you born, or what's your favorite color? I personally type in randomly generated data for those answers and save those in the password manager as well.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Well, you have another question here about the dark web. if we can go into darkness here. Anyone have access to dark web monitoring tools used for scans? Do we have, there's demo content, I guess you were discussing that before, but are there any access to the dark web monitoring tools themselves for scans, used for the scans?
There are some password managers will give you access to whatever email addresses and passwords combinations you type in there will tell you, oh, this password has been compromised on the dark web. And most password managers on the higher packages will give you that already. If you wanted to just do a scan, Have I Been Pwned, that website that I showed earlier, will tell you that a password has been compromised for a website, but it won't tell you what the password is. There are dark web monitoring tools that you could use. I believe some of the credit monitoring companies like Experian is trying to add that as well. But usually IT companies have access to dark web monitoring tools that they can provide.
Excellent, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about just day in and day out use, if we can, Marlon, for most of us, because I think we go about 99% of our time spent online feeling comfortable, feeling confident, feeling safe. You've got antivirus loaded in your laptop, you're feeling good. What have you seen that really has surprised you? What's caught you off guard?
Well, that's a little bit challenging because I have a lot of security training, right? And one of them is in ethical hacking. So I'm usually kind of expecting those type of things. I would say the realistic nature of some of the phishing emails. And also just the nature of trying to be helpful in how attackers target individuals. I was having a conversation with an attorney a couple of days ago, actually a week or two ago, and that person received a phone call and they were trying to ask, basically it was just a phone call. They were trying to say, hey, you have been selected to be featured in this magazine. And they started asking all these questions. So they really got this person excited. At the end of the conversation, they got essentially all the data that they needed, all the security answers and questions. Basically, they got anything that they might have been able to get from social media. They got all of that information in like 10, 15 minutes. So that's part of essentially being aware and not oversharing, being able to confirm things. And they were able to get this person to also, she was supposed to pay $3,000 for this. They got her a discount and essentially still paid out. There was a financial situation there, and that person ended up having to cancel the credit card. So they attacked everybody. Essentially, they go after everybody.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit and stay on email for just a moment, because I think this is the importance of authenticity we're talking about, is that if you use your signature, or if it does look authentic in your own personal use of email, that strengthens your communication capacity as well, because if it's just your name or and there isn't a lot of information attached to your email, it does take on the sort of the characteristics of that might actually be, a phishing email. So
signature, when you mention signature, the first thing that comes to mind for me is digital signatures, but not in the way that the user could see it. So for example, IT administrators can actually set up business email security, something called SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, so that when they're sending their company send an email to their clients, if somebody tries to send an email on behalf of their domain, basically, let's say from a Russian website, on behalf of their domain, then whoever receives that email would say, well, these didn't come from where it's supposed to come, because the IT person set up all the security, which is not that difficult to set up, but it does require some work. So whoever is receiving that email would not be subject to that email spoofing, essentially. In terms of physical signatures that you have, if the email is compromised, they could just copy and paste that.
Wow. Okay. Interesting stuff. Now the question that just came in too in a Q&A, you recommend using a scam checker website to learn about the scams out there. So use the website. And are those sites able to keep up with the volume of scams that are out there?
There are a few. There is a website called Joe's Sandbox, for example, and I'll make a note and I'll provide that as part of the resources, where and totalvirus.com too, where you could go and you could copy and paste. This will do is it will tell you whether the link that they send you via email is legitimate or not. and it will do a really good job in terms of telling you, well, this is phishing or is not phishing. So if you don't have a corporate type of spam filter and you get a suspicious email, you could try to copy and paste it there.
Interesting. So we've had a lot that we've learned here this morning. We certainly welcome more questions in the Q&A. Many of you have stayed right with us through this entire interesting presentation from Marlon. Marlon, of course, is here from Cybersecurity. And I think anybody has a certain element of embarrassment sometimes when they've been hacked. It's like, how could I be so dumb? What would you say to people about this? Because there's sort of an emotional reaction. Besides anger and rage, there's a sort of an emotional reaction you've dealt with your clients where they feel like, I should have been smarter, but I think we all know occasionally we get duped.
So unfortunately, hackers, they make their living by preying on people, right? By attacking human nature. So it's not about how they were able to successfully do that, because that's exactly what they want to do, right? That they're attacking people and trying to target them financially. So the approach that I would recommend would be, if you're within an organization, would be to try to report that to your manager as soon as possible. If this happened at home, then try to reach out to somebody that could help you with this. Because, for example, if you happen to lose your wallet and all your credit cards are in there, then you want to immediately start taking action, calling your credit card company, canceling bank accounts, or changing the credit card and all of that. Similarly, if there was an issue with the computer, you want to immediately start taking action. For example, if somebody gets remote access to your computer and you don't tell anybody, well, one of the things that usually happens is they could, if it is a fake support company, they could essentially copy all the passwords that you have in your browser without doing much. You wouldn't even know that they're doing that. But they could get a copy of all your passwords that are saved in your browser, and now they have access to all of that. And if you didn't have 2FA on some of them, they could get access to that as well. So being able to communicate early and as early as possible with somebody that could help you or your manager will improve the chances of basically risk reduction and reducing the impact.
So if you were to meet with a small staff, say you ran a nonprofit and you had a staff of 10 people, or if you had a small business, you had a staff of like 5 people. If you were to schedule a meeting with you, Marlon, and people would be talking directly with you and learning a little bit, talk about how you would help navigate a small staff of people to be really great at understanding the whole concept of cybersecurity.
So cybersecurity in general is really big, right? So I would try to narrow it down, and it depends on what they're doing. So for example, if it is a nonprofit that they're collecting payments or collecting sensitive information or getting donations, so it depends on the nature of that. Understanding how they're collecting data, it's very important to figure out what they would need as an organization, not only to protect. There are 3 aspects of cybersecurity. There's people, there is process, and there is technology. And hackers attack all 3, right? So for people, which are the employees, you generally want to be able to have secure awareness training. And regardless of the size, there are a lot of platforms out there that could be used to provide that, even if it's 5 employees. Then there is the process, which could be, for example, if you have wire transfer, well, it's very helpful to implement a procedure. So if there are wire transfer change instructions, you need to pick up the phone and make the verification to make sure with the vendor or the other party to make sure it's actually a legitimate request. And then the technology aspect, that could be anything from doing a physical, could be physical, but doing a security analysis or a security vulnerability test or a pen test. So there are a lot of different ways of doing that. And regardless of the organization, there are a lot of different affordable ways of doing that too.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of affordability, it's investment too. I mean, this security in any form is an investment.
Yep. So I see cybersecurity as risk management at the end of the day, because when you're working with an organization, the aspect of it is normally I help the organization create a list of recommendations, right? Comprehensively look at what they need, what they have, and make recommendations. Let's say there might be 50, but there is a lot of low risk, high impact things that they could implement, like implementing 2-factor authentication or looking at their vendors as well. Because some vendors might have access to sensitive data, so it might be worth working with them to see what are the best practices for implementing that product, like 2-factor authentication or securing remote access. So at the end of the day, it's more about understanding how attackers could get into the organization and then trying to secure that.
So would you say that most of the hackers, anybody who's really, the bad actors anywhere, it's really a financial motivation for them, that they're looking for a financial gain, or is it really just information gathering in this case?
I would say it's both. The primary objective for hackers, sometimes they do it for fun, sometimes they do it for fame, but usually they do it as a full-time job, sometimes on the side. There was an article a few days ago of an IT person, part of an IT company, getting arrested because he tried to impersonate a ransomware gang trying to extort their employer. So at the end of the day, everybody's out there trying to use technology, the bad actors, for financial gain, unfortunately. So the idea is to try to protect ourselves from them.
Yeah. So, and in other cases, it may be blackmail.
Exactly. And with blackmail, there are a lot of extortion-like attacks. Ransomware is an easy one because then you automatically lose access to all your data. And there is double extortion where, hey, either you pay us X amount of Bitcoins or money or whatever, and you get your data back. Now you have a backup of the data and it's a reliable backup, then you don't necessarily need to deal with that. There is an entire separate section of incident response because now you have a compromised system or systems in your network, and you have to make sure that they're no longer compromised. But even if you didn't pay that ransom and you dealt with the incident response part of it, they could actually release that data out on the internet. So let's say you're a law office or a medical office and you got ransomware in your office because you didn't do a cybersecurity assessment or they bypass everything you had in place. Now, you have two issues. First, that you have to potentially pay that. And second, that if you don't pay, or even if you do pay, your data could be leaked on the internet. And if that happened to be patient data or client data that's sensitive, now you have an official data breach that has implications as well.
So when we think about the international scale of all of this and the US government trying to help protect us and create safe cyber security borders, we always think of China, we always think of Russia, we think of Eastern Europe, perhaps, perhaps even that Nigerian prince who wants to share some money with you. We've all seemed to receive the same note from that prince. Are there any other emerging countries or other places around the world that have concerned you?
I would say that in general, for small and mid-sized businesses, is not nation-state attackers that are trying to target them specifically. Is more of opportunistic, right? So a lot of the times if they wanted to get into a large organization, there are actually teams of bad actors organizing. They run that as an actual business, as an enterprise. So they coordinate how they're going to do all of this. But for smaller businesses, they could just simply start sending phishing emails to thousands and hundreds of thousands of small businesses. Eventually, somebody who doesn't have a spam filter or different technologies will eventually fall victim to that. So it's more of an opportunistic thing where they might only have a 1% success chance, but at the end of the day, that's still a large number.
Yeah, and domestically, I would assume growth here in the United States.
Exactly. So even here, the government has some resources like the FTC that came from the government. So they're trying to help small businesses as much as they can by providing awareness and training and things like that. But at the end of the day, attackers could come from anywhere, and they use something called VPN. They use something called the dark web for the Tor network and all of that. So you could get an email that seems to be coming from China, but in reality, it could be somebody a couple towns down.
Interesting. We do welcome closing questions. Anybody has a question for Marlon, specific, broad-based, whatever you'd like, certainly put it in the Q&A. You can also entertain that to our panelists here if you'd like to address David Gemma, and for Unipen for hosting our technology council, and Ed Tankas from Alliant Technologies, who's also an IT specialist. Just put a Q&A or in the chat as well. So as we're wrapping up here, Ed Tankas, just a few final thoughts from you as well. And you've been in the mines, as it were, with laptops. Anything that comes to mind that we've learned in the last hour or so? First, you have to unmute.
Yeah, technology can be confusing, can it? Even for people that use it on a daily basis. There were some comments about Microsoft Office and Microsoft Defender. Marlon, I'm not sure. Do you have much experience with Defender? I have some. I know that they have the ability to run test cases to test employees who have it. Have you done any work with it?
I have. So Office 365, if you're using that platform, that they have two things. They have Microsoft Defender for endpoint, which is an antivirus. If you have the free license of the Defender, of the free antivirus, then you get what you're paying for. When they mean that they have an EDR, so there are EDR antivirus platforms out there like SentinelOne, Carbon Black, and all of that. You cannot get those at Best Buy. But Microsoft Defender, they do have a paid version. Now, if you're using the paid version, you're better off than the free version. In terms of the spam filter, they do have their own version of the spam filter called Defender for Office 365, which is good. There are other companies as well. Some people say that it's a good practice to have your spam filter and your email filter separate. Some people like the unity between the two of them. So Microsoft Defender for Office 365 is not a bad product. There are other ones that are a little bit more comprehensive out there.
Excellent question there too. Well, I think we've learned a lot. I think you're on. You've got a busy job, Marlon. I think you have a lot to take in. So if anyone wants an initial consultation with you from their small business, individual, solopreneur, or even a larger company, when you first meet with somebody, what do you sit down and talk about?
I like to understand how they do business, what's important to them, what keeps them up at night, and essentially, what they're concerned about. Because that drives things a little bit more. Sometimes they're concerned about cyber insurance and the fact that they need that. Sometimes they're concerned about that they had a data breach or a security incident before. When I do a security assessment or security analysis, it's a little bit more comprehensive, but I usually take the approach of getting to know the business first, trying to understand what it is that they need, what it is that they're concerned about. There isn't a lot of aspects out there, legal and regulatory compliance, that I can help with, but at the end of the day, it's more about securing the client in a way that's cost effective for them.
Excellent, great. Well, you can certainly contact Marlon Bermudez and Marlon Technologies and Marber Security, excuse me, and learn a little bit more. But I think it's been a particularly interesting time today. Marlon Bermudez, thank you so much. David Gemma, Unipen, for sponsoring our Technology Council and our Technology Chair from Align Technologies at Tankas. Thank you all for a very, very formative day, but don't go away. There's a couple of things I'd like to tell our crew about here today. We do have some upcoming events at our chamber. Next Wednesday, July 26th, 8 in the morning, our chamber is going to be hosting the Elm City Club right on the green. Sponsored by Avelo Airlines right here, Councils and Conversations, the economic implications of childcare, how businesses and employers are affected by that. Coming up in August 14th, we have our wonderful Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce and Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce Golf Classic. Our 39th annual year, we'll be doing this up at the Farms Country Club in Wallingford. Just a couple of spaces left for individual golfers and foursomes. And you can contact us here at the Quinnipiac Chamber if you'd like to participate there. Coming up in September 14th, it'll be at the Hotel Marcel, our 2023 Annual Policy Summit. And this time we'll discuss building an equitable economy. And of course, in North Haven, we have our big event coming up on the North Haven Green, the inaugural North Haven Festival and Business Expo, Saturday, September 23rd. We will have dozens of booths, food, antique cars, music, family activities, but it's a great business-to-business event as well, so you can learn about some of North Haven and regional businesses, nonprofit organizations that will be with us on that day in the North Haven Green. And of course, later this year on November the 15th, our Big Connect, presented by Comcast Business. It's our premier business expo on November 15th. And right now we've extended the deadline just a couple of days for early bird pricing for the end of this week on Friday. If you'd like to register and get your booth now, you've been there from last year as well. So it's a big event coming up, the Big Connect, November 15th. And of course, we want to thank you all for attending today, our social engineering cybersecurity webinar from our Technology Council. Marlon Bermudez at Tankas, David Gemma, thank you so much. Everybody, we want to thank you as well for joining us here today. Until next time, I'm Ray Andrusen with the Quinnipiac Chamber of Commerce. Have a good day.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.